Get out! You're making my garage stink, you filthy rat!
Chief Engineer Victor Harrington didn't even lift his head from the Titan V12 engine.
Sir, I hear the engine. I can fix it.
You can fix it!
He finally looked, his face contorted in a grimace.
You mop the floors, you unclog the toilets. You crawl on your knees to clean up other people's messes. And you dare say I can fix a $12 million engine that 100 grand Port C mechanics couldn't fix in 6 hours?
He stood, walked to Carter, grabbed his uniform.
Go back to your slum, or I'll have you dragged out!
100 mechanics. Silence. Carter didn't back down, didn't blink. His gaze swept past Victor, straight to the dying engine. 30 minutes later, that same Victor Harrington would do something nobody could imagine. He would bow his head. Monaco, the jewel of motorsport. A city carved into cliffs above the Mediterranean, where the roar of engines echoed off marble hotels and million-dollar yachts bobbed in the harbor below. Every May, the world's fastest machines and richest men descended on this tiny strip of asphalt for one reason: to win. And no team wanted it more than Harrington Racing. Victor Harrington had built the team from his father's legacy. 3 generations of Harringtons had poured their name, their money, and their reputation into this sport. Victor's grandfather started with a single garage in Surrey. His father turned it into a contender. Victor was supposed to make it a dynasty. The Titan V12 was his masterpiece. 4 years of research. 18 engineers working in a sealed lab outside Stuttgart. 73 prototypes discarded before the final design locked in. The result was a $12 million hybrid engine that Harrington Racing believed would rewrite the record books. Lighter than anything on the grid, more efficient, more powerful. The simulations said it would shave a full second off their best lap time. In Monaco, where races were won by hundredths of a second, that was an eternity.
Today was supposed to be its debut. The morning started like any other race day. Crews arrived before dawn. Tool carts rolled across the garage floor. Coffee machines hummed in the back. Mechanics stretched, joked, taped their wrists. The smell of brake cleaner and rubber hung in the air like cologne. At 7:14 a.m., lead technician Tommy Blake fired up the Titan V12 for a routine warm cycle. It ran for 11 seconds. Then came the knock. A deep metallic thud from somewhere inside the block. Once, twice. Then a grinding sound, like teeth dragging across sheet metal, and the engine seized. Every screen on the diagnostic rack flatlined. Tommy's coffee cup hit the floor. What the hell just happened? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Within 20 minutes, Victor Harrington was in the garage, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, face white. He leaned over the engine like a surgeon over a dying patient. Run the full diagnostic, everything. I want every sensor readout, every pressure log, every thermal scan from the last 48 hours. They ran it. Clean. Every parameter within spec. No fault codes, no anomalies. The computer said the engine was perfect. The engine said otherwise. Victor called in his A-team. 8 senior engineers, each one a specialist. Combustion, fuel systems, turbo mapping, electrical. They crowded around the Titan V12 like priests around a relic, running their hands over the block, whispering theories, arguing in hushed tones. Nothing. By 9 a.m., word had spread through the paddock. Other teams offered help, not out of kindness, but curiosity. A dead engine at Monaco was gossip. A dead $12 million prototype was front-page news. Mechanics from Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, they all came. Some brought their own diagnostic equipment. Some came with decades of experience and hands that had rebuilt engines blindfolded. They circled the Titan V12 in shifts, teams of 5, 10, 20, 100 mechanics, the finest in motorsport. 6 hours. Nothing. The clock on the garage wall ticked past 1 p.m. The race was at 4. Victor paced the garage like a caged animal. He'd called Stuttgart. The lab team was on a flight, but they wouldn't land until evening. He'd called Tokyo. The sensor manufacturer promised remote support, but their data showed nothing wrong. He'd called in every favor he had. Nobody could tell him why the Titan V12 wouldn't start. The $200 million sponsorship deal with Cronenberg Automotive sat on his desk, unsigned. The terms were simple. Win Monaco with the Titan V12, and the money was theirs. Lose, or worse, don't race at all, and Cronenberg walks. 3 generations of Harrington legacy, reduced to a silent engine in a concrete garage. Victor slammed his palm on the workbench. Tools rattled. A wrench rolled off the edge and clattered on the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. Somebody give me an answer. I don't care who. Janitor, intern, I don't care. Somebody tell me what is wrong with this engine. He didn't mean it. Not the janitor part. That was just frustration talking. But Carter Mills heard it. Carter had been there since 5 a.m. He was always there before anyone else, mopping the pit lane walkways, wiping down the barrier walls, emptying the bins that overflowed with energy drink cans and cable ties. 3 years he'd worked this job, and in 3 years, not a single person had learned his name. He was the janitor. Sometimes, "Hey, you!" Sometimes nothing at all. Just a shape they walked around on the way to something more important. But Carter listened. He always listened. Every morning, when the engines fired up for warm cycles, Carter would slow down near the garage. He'd push his mop a little slower, tilt his head, close his eyes. The engines spoke to him the way they'd spoken to his grandfather, not in data or fault codes, but in vibration, in rhythm, in the spaces between sounds where something felt wrong before it looked wrong. This morning, at 7:14, Carter had been mopping the corridor outside Garage 7 when the Titan V12 fired up. He heard the 11 seconds of clean running. He heard the knock. And in that knock, he heard something none of the 100 mechanics heard, because they were listening with machines, and Carter was listening with 40 years of his grandfather's wisdom pressed into his bones. He knew what was wrong. He'd known since 7:14 a.m. For 6 hours he'd watched them fail. Not with arrogance, not with satisfaction, with patience. Because Carter Mills had learned long ago that a black man with an answer nobody asked for was worse than a black man with no answer at all. The world didn't punish ignorance. It punished audacity. But now it was 1 p.m. The race was 3 hours away, and the engine was still dead. Carter set his mop against the wall. He dried his hands on his pants. He straightened the collar of his faded blue uniform, and he walked into Garage 7. The room was thick with tension and stale coffee. 100 bodies crammed into a space built for 40, half of them leaning against walls with arms crossed, the other half still circling the Titan V12 with the dull eyes of men who'd run out of ideas but hadn't run out of pride. Victor stood at the center, phone pressed to his ear, barking at someone in German. Carter walked up to Tommy Blake, the lead technician, the only one who'd ever nodded at him in the hallway. Tommy. Tommy turned, blinked. Carter? What are you doing in here, man? The engine. I know what's wrong. Tommy stared at him for 3 full seconds. Then something between a laugh and a cough escaped his throat. You know what's wrong? Yes. Tommy glanced left, glanced right. Then, against every instinct screaming in his head, he turned to the group. Hey, the janitor says he knows what's wrong with the engine. The silence lasted exactly 1 second. Then the laughter hit. A snort from the back, a chuckle near the tool rack. Someone clapped once, slow and mocking. Then it rolled through the garage like a wave. 100 men laughing at one. Victor Harrington lowered his phone. What did you just say? Tommy's face went red. He said he... The janitor. Victor's voice cut through the noise. He walked toward Carter slowly, every step deliberate. The laughter died. The janitor says he can fix the engine that 100 of the best mechanics in the world couldn't touch. He stopped in front of Carter, close enough that Carter could smell his cologne, mixing with engine grease and sweat. Close enough to see the vein pulsing at Victor's temple. You mop floors. You scrub toilets. You empty garbage cans. That is what you do. That is all you do. That is all you will ever do. Carter met his eyes. Calm. Level. Give me 30 minutes. The garage went dead quiet. Victor's jaw tightened. His right hand balled into a fist at his side. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not contempt, but something closer to fear. Because a man who says, "Give me 30 minutes," with that kind of calm, either knows something or has nothing left to lose. And Victor couldn't tell which one scared him more. Get him out of here, Victor said quietly. And if he steps foot in this garage again, he's done. Not just here, everywhere. I'll make sure no pit in Europe lets him hold a mop. 2 security guards appeared at Carter's sides. Each took an arm. Carter didn't resist. He let them walk him toward the door. His work boots squeaked on the polished concrete. But as they pushed him through the threshold, Carter turned his head. His eyes found the Titan V12 one last time. Sitting there under the fluorescent lights, silent, surrounded by 100 men who couldn't hear what it was saying. And something shifted in that room. Not loudly, not in any way you could point to, but in the back of the crowd, a young engineer named Sophie Aldridge watched Carter's face as he was dragged out. And she didn't see delusion. She didn't see a man guessing. She saw certainty, the kind that doesn't need permission. Sophie pulled out her phone. She typed one word and sent it to the man sitting in the VIP lounge 3 floors above the pit lane. Come. That man was Lawrence Pemberton, 70 years old, owner of Harrington Racing, the man who signed Victor's paychecks. And he was already standing up. What none of them knew, not Victor, not the 100 mechanics, not the cameras starting to circle the garage like vultures, was that everything they believed about talent, about credentials, about who deserves to be heard, was about to be proven wrong. And it would only take 30 minutes. Carter Mills didn't learn engines from a textbook. He learned them the way some people learn prayers, by repetition, by reverence, by watching someone he loved do something sacred. His grandfather, Elijah Mills, was born in 1932 in Selma, Alabama, grew up in a 2-room house with no running water and a tin roof that sang when it rained. By the time he was 12, Elijah could take apart a Ford flathead V8 and put it back together in the dark. By 15, he could diagnose a misfire from 30 feet away, just by listening. People in town called him the Whisperer. White farmers drove their trucks to the back of his family's property at night, ashamed to be seen asking a black boy for help, but too desperate not to. Elijah fixed their engines. They paid him in coins and silence. He never got a job in a real shop. He applied to every garage in the county, 14 of them. The answer was always the same, sometimes polite, sometimes not. One owner told him, "We don't let your kind touch our machines." Another said, "Come back when God makes you the right color." Elijah kept a list of every rejection in a small leather notebook, the same one that would end up in Carter's back pocket 40 years later. But Elijah didn't stop. Behind his house, in a corrugated shed that leaned slightly to the left, he built his own workshop. Scrap engines from junkyards, tools bought one at a time from pawn shops, a single hanging bulb that flickered when the wind blew. That shed became his cathedral, and Carter was his only student. From the age of 6, Carter spent every Saturday in that shed. Elijah would sit him on an overturned crate, place an engine part in his small hands and say, "Close your eyes. Feel it. What's it telling you?" At first, Carter felt nothing. Cold metal, rough edges, weight. But Elijah was patient. Week after week, year after year, he taught Carter to feel the difference between a valve seat that was true and one that was off by a fraction of a degree. He taught him to hear the difference between a healthy combustion cycle and one that stuttered, a difference so small that machines couldn't measure it, but fingers and ears could. "An engine talks to those who listen," Elijah told him once, wiping his hands on a rag so stained it had no original color left. "Most people are too busy shouting to hear." That became Carter's motto, not because he chose it, because it chose him. By the time Carter was 14, he could rebuild a transmission faster than any mechanic in the county. By 16, he was diagnosing problems that shop owners with 30 years of experience couldn't find. Elijah's notebook, now thick with hand-drawn diagrams, timing charts, compression ratios, and notes written in a careful, slanting script, became their shared Bible. Then Elijah got sick. It started with a cough that wouldn't leave. Then the weight loss. Then the mornings where he couldn't grip a wrench. Lung cancer. From decades of working in unventilated spaces, breathing in metal dust and exhaust fumes without a mask. The same work that gave him purpose took his breath away, one cell at a time. Elijah died on a Tuesday in November. Carter was 16. The shed went quiet. The hanging bulb still flickered, but nobody turned it on anymore. Carter held the notebook at the funeral. He didn't cry, not because he wasn't broken, but because Elijah had taught him that some things you carry standing up. After that, everything narrowed. No money for college, no connections, no one to vouch for a black kid from Alabama with no diploma and grease under his fingernails. Carter worked construction, washed dishes, drove delivery trucks. Every job paid less than the last. Every boss looked through him like glass. 3 years ago, he saw a listing. Janitorial staff needed at the Monaco Grand Prix pit facilities. The pay was low. The work was invisible. But the listing said pit area, and Carter's heart jumped at 2 words he hadn't felt in years: engine and close. He took the job the same day. Every night, after his shift, Carter stayed late. He didn't tell anyone. He'd sit in the empty corridor outside the garages, back against the wall, eyes closed, and just listen. Warm-up cycles at dawn, diagnostic runs at midday, the idle hum of machines being tuned to perfection. He absorbed it all, cross-referencing what he heard against Elijah's notes, adding his own observations in the margins, teaching himself the language of engines he'd never been allowed to touch. 6 months ago, he'd noticed a misaligned fuel relay on Harrington Racing's backup car during a late-night walk. He fixed it, quietly, cleaned up, left. The next morning, Tommy Blake scratched his head and told the crew the fault had resolved itself overnight. Nobody questioned it. Nobody thanked anyone. The car just worked. Carter smiled that day, a small, private smile, because Elijah was right. Engines talked to those who listened. And Carter had been listening his whole life. Lawrence Pemberton didn't knock. The door to Garage 7 swung open and the room shifted. Not because Lawrence was loud. He wasn't. He was 70 years old, silver-haired, wore a navy suit with no tie, and walked with the kind of quiet authority that comes from owning everything in the room without needing to say so. Victor straightened immediately. The phone disappeared into his pocket. "Mr. Pemberton, I didn't know you were coming down. We're handling—" "You're not handling anything, Victor." Lawrence's voice was low, even, like a man who'd stopped raising his voice decades ago because he didn't need to. "I just watched your security team drag a man out of this garage. A man in a janitor's uniform. Who was he?" Victor's jaw clenched. "Nobody. Maintenance staff. He wandered in and started talking nonsense about fixing the engine. I had him removed." "What did he say, exactly?" "He said he knew what was wrong." Victor almost smiled. "Which is absurd. The man mops floors for a living." Lawrence turned to Sophie Aldridge, standing near the back with her arms crossed. "You texted me one word. Come. Why?" Sophie hesitated. 100 pairs of eyes swiveled to her. She was 28, 3 years into the team, the youngest engineer in the room. Speaking against Victor was career suicide. Everyone knew it. She knew it. She spoke anyway. Because when they dragged him out, he wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. He looked at the engine the way we look at something we understand. She paused. "I've been staring at that engine for 6 hours, and I don't have that look. None of us do." The room went quiet. Not the mocking quiet from before. A different kind. The kind where people start wondering if they missed something. Lawrence studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned back to Victor. "Bring him back." The words landed like a grenade in a library. Victor's face flushed from his collar to his hairline. "Mr. Pemberton, with all due respect, this is insane. He's a janitor. He cleans bathrooms. He doesn't have a single certification, a single degree, a single hour of formal training. You can't seriously—" "I said bring him back. We have 100 engineers in this room. 100. The finest in the world. Ferrari sent people. Mercedes sent people. And you want to hand a $12 million prototype to a man who pushes a mop?" "Victor." Lawrence didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Your 100 engineers have had 6 hours. The race is in less than 3. The engine is still dead. I'm giving the janitor 30 minutes. Bring him back. Now." Victor stood frozen. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. 5 seconds. 10. Then he jerked his head at the security guard by the door. "Get him!" 2 minutes later, Carter Mills walked back into Garage 7. He looked exactly the same. Faded blue uniform, calm face, hands at his sides. If being dragged out had humiliated him, nothing on his face said so. If walking back in front of the same 100 people who'd laughed at him felt like anything at all, he kept it buried deep. Lawrence met him halfway across the concrete floor, extended his hand. Carter shook it. Firm, brief, no hesitation. "What's your name?" "Carter Mills, sir." "Carter, my engineer says you know what's wrong with this engine. Is that true?" "Yes, sir." "How do you know?" Carter looked at the Titan V12, then back at Lawrence. "Because I can hear it. The engine is telling you what's wrong. It's been telling you all day. But nobody in this room is listening." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back laughed, short, nervous, quickly swallowed. Lawrence nodded once. "You have 30 minutes. Victor stepped forward. His voice was tight and controlled, but he pitched it loud enough for every camera and microphone now drifting toward the garage entrance. "Fine. 30 minutes. Let's make it official." He turned to the room, raised his voice. "If this janitor fails, and he will, I want him fired. Not reassigned, not transferred to another facility. Fired. Banned from every racing venue in Europe. His name goes on the blacklist. He never sets foot near a pit lane again." He looked at Lawrence. "Those are my terms." Lawrence didn't blink. "And if he succeeds?" Victor laughed. Just once. "He won't." "But if he does?" The smile died on Victor's face. He spread his arms wide. "Then I'll admit I was wrong. Right here, in front of everyone. Satisfied?" Lawrence turned to Carter. "Are you okay with this?" Carter's expression hadn't changed since he walked in. "I just need 30 minutes, and the engine running at idle." Then it's settled. Word spread like gasoline on a hot track. By the time Carter turned toward the Titan V12, the garage had transformed. Mechanics who'd been leaning against walls pressed forward 3 rows deep. Team principals from rival outfits appeared at the entrance, craning their necks. An FIA media crew pushed a camera through the crowd. 2 journalists with press lanyards squeezed in behind them. A pit crew member near the back was already live streaming on his phone. His caption read, "Janitor about to touch $12 million engine at Monaco GP." Within minutes, the stream hit 4,000 viewers, then 10,000. Then the counter climbed so fast, nobody could read it. Carter didn't notice any of it. He stood in front of the Titan V12, close enough to touch. He didn't. Not yet. He stood the way Elijah used to stand before starting work. Still, patient, reading the silence the way a doctor reads a chest before the stethoscope touches skin. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out the leather notebook. 100 engineers watched a janitor place a cracked, oil-stained notebook on the workbench beside a $12 million engine. Some smirked. Some squinted, trying to read the pages. A senior combustion specialist from Mercedes tilted his head and whispered, "What the hell is that?" Carter opened it to a page near the middle. A hand-drawn diagram of a V12 intake manifold, labeled in careful, slanting handwriting that wasn't his own. His grandfather's handwriting. 40 years old, still precise. He ran his finger along the diagram, then looked up at Tommy Blake. "Start the engine. Idle only. Keep it under 2,000 RPM. Tommy looked at Victor. Victor said nothing. His arms were crossed, his jaw set, his eyes daring Carter to fail. Tommy looked at Lawrence. Lawrence nodded. Tommy reached for the ignition panel. His hand hovered over the switch. The garage held its breath. 100 people, 2 cameras, 40,000 viewers online, and one janitor standing alone in front of a dead machine that the entire world of motorsport had given up on. He pressed the switch. The Titan V12 coughed, shuddered, coughed again. Then it caught, a rough, unhealthy idle that shook the engine mounts and sent a low vibration through the concrete floor. It sounded like a heart struggling to beat with broken ribs. Carter closed his eyes, and he listened. For 45 seconds, Carter didn't move. The Titan V12 shook on its mounts, coughing through its rough idle like a sick animal. The sound bounced off the concrete walls and filled every corner. To the 100 mechanics watching, it was noise. The same broken stuttering they'd heard for 6 hours. To Carter, it was a conversation. He tilted his head left, then right, eyes closed. Breathing slowed until his chest barely moved. Fingers loose at his sides. The only part of him working was his ears, trained since childhood to hear what machines couldn't measure. The garage watched him the way you watch a man on the edge of a building, half expecting a miracle, half expecting a fall. Victor tapped his watch. 29 minutes. Then Carter opened his eyes. He walked to the left side of the engine block, crouched beside cylinder 3 and pressed his bare ear flat against the aluminum. No stethoscope, no sensor, just skin against metal. The way Elijah had taught him 30 years ago, when Carter was too small to reach the block without standing on a crate. 15 seconds. The garage barely breathed. He stood, pointed at the cylinder. Microfracture. Intake valve seat. Cylinder 3. Tommy pulled up his scan report. We checked every valve seat this morning, twice. Clean. Your scanner resolves to 0.5 millimeter. This crack is 0.3. It sits dormant at ambient temperature, but opens under thermal expansion at operating heat. At 2400 RPM, it leaks air into the intake charge, just enough to disrupt combustion. Carter tapped the cylinder head with one knuckle. You can hear it. A whisper of air where there shouldn't be any. It's been screaming at you all day. The Mercedes specialist leaned forward, arms uncrossed for the first time in hours. Run a dye penetrant test, Carter said. You'll find it. Victor pushed off the workbench. We're not wasting time on a janitor's guesswork. Do it. Lawrence's voice. 2 words. Final. Tommy sprayed the penetrant. Waited. Wiped. Applied the developer. 100 bodies pressed forward. The FIA camera dropped to one knee. The live stream crossed 80,000. The developer bloomed pink. A thin diagonal fracture across the valve seat. 0.3 millimeters. Too small for the scanner. Too real to deny. Exactly where Carter said. The silence that followed wasn't mocking. It was the kind that weighs something. The kind where 100 trained professionals realize a man with no credentials just saw what they couldn't. Victor's smirk vanished. He stared at the pink line as if it had betrayed him. Someone whispered, "How did he hear that?" Nobody answered. Carter was already moving. He ran his fingertips along the fuel rail, slowly, barely touching, the way a blind man reads Braille, not searching for what's there, but feeling for what's wrong. He glided over injectors 1 through 4, each time a micro pause, a calibration. He stopped at 5, rested 2 fingers on its housing. Off axis, 0.15 degrees. Graham Pratt stepped forward. 22 years of experience, 2 patents in injection design. He'd personally aligned every injector, signed off on them. Impossible. I aligned those myself. Within your spec, Carter said. Not within what this engine needs. 0.15 degrees off-axis creates an asymmetric spray on bank 2. Fuel mixture runs lean. Not enough to throw a code, but enough to create uneven combustion pressure across the block. He paused. That differential is amplifying the vibration from the cracked valve seat. The two problems are feeding each other. Fix one without the other. The engine destroys itself in 3 laps. 22 years of experience being quietly corrected by a man in a faded blue uniform. Get me the laser alignment rig, Graham said. His voice was hoarse. 90 seconds. Red beam. Digital readout. 0.15 degrees. Exact. The garage erupted in disbelief. 100 engineers turning to each other. The same unspoken question. How did he feel that with his fingers? Graham took off his glasses, cleaned them, put them back. The number hadn't changed. He turned to Carter and nodded. A small, slow nod. The kind one craftsman gives another when words would cheapen it. Victor's arms hung limp. Color drained from his face. His eyes darted between Carter and the screen like a man watching the ground crack open beneath him. The live stream passed 150,000. Carter opened the notebook to the marked page. Yellow paper, faded ink. But the lines of the diagram were precise, drawn by a man who understood engines the way some people understand music. Beside the V12 intake manifold diagram, in Elijah's careful slanting script, was a formula, a timing offset calculation. Margin notes added over years, refined, tested, proven in a shed that leaned to the left under an Alabama sky. Third problem, Carter said. Not mechanical. Calibration. He held up the notebook. The room pressed closer. Your ignition timing uses the standard algorithm for this displacement class. But the Titan isn't standard. Over square, wider bore, shorter stroke. Your compression ratio plus standard timing creates a micro pressure spike before peak load. The ECU reads it as normal. It's not. It's pre-detonation masked by engine management software. Invisible on every screen here. He tapped the formula, but it's there. Over time, it cracks more than one valve seat. It kills the engine. He pointed to the bottom of the page. My grandfather figured this out 40 years ago on a similar displacement ratio. No computer, no simulation, no degree. Just a pencil, a flickering light bulb, and a mind the world told to stop thinking. His voice didn't waver, but something in it deepened. Offset ignition timing by 1.4 degrees at peak load. The spike disappears. Combustion completes cleanly. Silence. Carter could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing and, beyond the walls, a seagull screaming over Monaco Harbor. Run it, Carter said. Simulate it. Tommy typed. 8 seconds of simulation. 100 people, 3 cameras, 200,000 viewers holding their breath. Results on screen. Power output, up 3.2% from design spec. Torque curve, smoother across the full RPM range. Pre-detonation, 0. The Titan V12 wasn't just fixed. It was better than it had ever been. Better than 4 years of research, 73 prototypes, and 18 Stuttgart engineers had achieved. Because of a formula written by hand in a leaning shed by a man the world never allowed inside a real garage. Tommy turned in his chair, face white. We spent 4 years on this calibration. How did he... He stopped, Carter wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at the notebook, at his grandfather's handwriting, at the careful letters of a man who died in a house with a tin roof, whose lungs filled with the metal dust of the work he loved, who never got a single chance, and left behind the answer 100 of the world's best mechanics couldn't find. Lawrence Pemberton rose from his chair, slowly, the way a man stands when he's witnessed something he'll carry until he dies.
He didn't clap. He didn't speak. He just stood. Sophie stood next. Then Graham, eyes red, jaw tight. Then Tommy. Then the Mercedes specialist. The journalists. The camera operators. The mechanics who'd laughed, some wiping their eyes, pretending it was garage dust. One by one, row by row, 100 people rising for a janitor holding a dead man's notebook in a room that told him he didn't belong. The applause started with one pair of hands in the back. Then it swelled. Not boardroom applause, but the raw, shaking kind that comes from people who've had something inside them broken open. Victor Harrington was the last one sitting, hands gripping the workbench, knuckles white, eyes locked on the simulation. The numbers that proved, in cold digital precision, that everything he believed about who deserved to stand in this room was wrong. He didn't stand, not yet, but his grip on the workbench had begun to loosen. The applause faded. The simulation proved the theory. But theory wasn't enough. The engine still sat dead on its mounts, and the race was 2 hours away. Carter rolled up his sleeves. "I need a replacement valve seat for cylinder 3, standard size, micro-torque wrench, injector alignment jig, ECU flash terminal access." Tommy sent 2 mechanics running to the supply trailer. The parts arrived in 4 minutes. Carter laid them out on the workbench in a precise row, left to right, in the exact order they'd be used, the way Elijah had taught him. No wasted motion, no searching. Every second mattered. He started with the valve seat. His hands moved with a fluency that silenced the room all over again. Not fast, precise, every movement deliberate. He removed the damaged seat from cylinder 3 with slow, even pressure, keeping the bore surface perfectly intact. The cracked piece came out whole. He held it up for a moment, the hairline fracture visible under the lights, a pink ghost of dye still clinging to its edge, then set it aside. The new seat went in. Gasket compound applied in a thin, even ring, pressed into the bore by hand until Carter felt it seat true. A sensation so subtle that only hands trained for decades could detect it. Then the torque wrench. 3 clicks. Done. 6 minutes. He moved to injector 5. Graham was already beside him, alignment jig in hand. No one had asked him to help. He'd just stepped up. Carter guided the correction. 0.15 degrees clockwise, secondary clamp locked to prevent drift under vibration. Graham's hands were steady. His eyes never left Carter's fingers. "Check it." Graham ran the laser. The readout held. 0, 0, 0. Perfect axis. He exhaled. A long, slow breath he'd been holding for 10 minutes. 11 minutes. Then the ECU. Carter sat at the diagnostic terminal. The screen glowed blue. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent 3 years reading discarded manuals in empty corridors after midnight, teaching himself the digital language of engines he was never supposed to touch. He accessed the ignition mapping, found the peak load timing table, changed one value, 1.4 degree offset, checked it against the formula in the notebook.
his eyes flicking between the screen and his grandfather's handwriting. One last time. Saved the flash. 14 minutes. Carter stood up from the terminal. He looked at the Titan V12, ran his hand along the top of the block, not checking anything, just feeling it. The way you touch something you've spent your whole life waiting to hold. He stepped back. Started. The garage went still. 200,000 people watching through screens around the world. 100 people standing 3 feet away. 3 cameras recording every frame. 1 janitor in a faded blue uniform. And one $12 million engine that was about to prove everyone wrong. Or prove Victor right. Tommy's hand found the ignition switch. It hovered there for a second that felt like an hour. He pressed it. The Titan V12 turned over once. Twice. Then it caught. Not the rough, broken idol from before. Not the coughing, shaking, dying animal sound that had haunted this garage for 6 hours. This was something else entirely. The engine settled into a smooth, deep, resonant hum. The kind of sound that makes the hair on your arms rise. Clean, even, powerful. Every cylinder firing in perfect sequence. The vibration through the concrete floor wasn't a tremor anymore. It was a heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. Diagnostic screens lit up green. Every parameter, every sensor, every readout. Power output, 3.2% above the original design specification. Nobody spoke. Tommy stared at the screen. Graham stared at the screen. The Mercedes specialist closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. Not in disbelief, but in surrender. Carter stood with his hands at his sides, grease on his fingers, the notebook in his back pocket, faded uniform still damp from the floor cleaner that had splashed on him hours ago, back when he was just the janitor, back when he was nobody. Lawrence Pemberton walked to Carter. He didn't shake his hand this time. He placed both hands on Carter's shoulders and held them there. His eyes were wet. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. "I've never been more certain of anything." Carter nodded once. His throat was tight. Then, a sound from behind, a chair scraping against concrete. Victor Harrington stood up. Every eye turned, every camera, every screen. Victor walked toward Carter, slowly, each step heavier than the last. His face wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't arrogant. It was something else, something broken, something rearranging itself in real time. The face of a man whose entire worldview had just been taken apart in 14 minutes by the person he'd called filth. He stopped in front of Carter, close enough to touch. And Victor Harrington, chief engineer, third-generation racing legacy, the man who never bent for anyone, who had grabbed this janitor's uniform and told him to crawl back to his slum, lowered his head. A deep, slow bow. No words. The bow said everything his mouth couldn't. That he was wrong. That he knew it. And that no amount of titles, degrees, or generations of legacy could stand against what Carter Mills carried in his hands, his ears, and a cracked leather notebook. From somewhere outside, from the crowd at the entrance, from phones streaming to hundreds of thousands of screens, a single voice said what everyone was thinking. The janitor fixed it. And the world heard. 20 minutes after the engine roared back to life, Lawrence Pemberton led Carter into a small office behind Garage 7. The room was bare. A desk, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the harbor where the afternoon sun threw gold across the water. Lawrence closed the door. The noise of the garage, the voices, the cameras, the engine still humming on its mounts, faded to a muffle behind the glass. He sat down. Carter remained standing. "Sit, please." Carter sat. He placed the notebook on the desk between them, the cracked leather, the yellow pages, Elijah's handwriting facing up. Lawrence looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Carter. "I'm not going to insult you by offering you a janitor's raise," he said. "I'm offering you a position, lead engine specialist, full authority over the Titan program, your own R&D budget, a salary that reflects what you just did out there, not what your badge used to say." Carter didn't react. Not immediately. His eyes stayed on the notebook. "You'd report directly to me," Lawrence continued. "Not to Victor, not to anyone in the engineering hierarchy. Directly to me." The harbor light shifted through the window. A yacht horn sounded somewhere far below. "How much?" Carter asked. Not because the money mattered, because he needed to know if they were serious. Lawrence told him the number. It was 20 times what he earned pushing a mop. Carter was quiet for a long time. His fingers rested on the edge of the notebook. On the page where Elijah had drawn the V12 manifold, on the formula that had just saved a $12 million engine and a $200 million deal. "I have one condition," Carter said. Lawrence leaned forward. "Name it." "A foundation, funded by the team, for young black men and women who can't afford engineering school. Kids who have the talent, but not the door. I want it named after my grandfather." He tapped the notebook. "Elijah Mills Foundation." Lawrence didn't hesitate. "Done. That's all I want." Lawrence studied him. The kind of look a man gives when he realizes the person across from him isn't negotiating. They're building something bigger than a career. "Then welcome to Harrington Racing, Mr. Mills." Carter picked up the notebook, held it against his chest, and for the first time that day, he smiled. 3 hours later, the Titan V12 crossed the finish line first. Not by 1/10 of a second, by 4 full seconds, the largest winning margin at Monaco in over a decade. The engine didn't just run, it sang. Every lap faster than the simulation predicted, every corner sharper. The car that was supposed to be dead by noon had delivered the performance of the season. The pit erupted. Champagne, screaming, mechanics hugging like they'd survived something. Because they had. But the story that went viral that night wasn't the race. It was the janitor. By midnight, the garage live stream had been viewed 12 million times. By morning, every major news outlet on the planet had the story. BBC, CNN, Sky Sports, Le Monde. The New York Times ran it above the fold with a headline that became one of the most shared articles of the year. The janitor who silenced 100 engineers. And with the story came the video. Every second of Victor Harrington's behavior captured on camera. The insults, the sneering. "Get out. You're making my garage stink, you filthy rat." The grab. "Go back to your slum." All of it clipped, captioned, set to music. Shared with hashtags that trended in 37 countries. Hashtag Justice for Carter. Hashtag The Janitor Fixed It. Hashtag Elijah Mills. Cronenberg Automotive, the $200 million sponsor, issued a 3-sentence statement the next morning. They were deeply disturbed by senior staff conduct. They expected immediate corrective action. They would be monitoring closely. Lawrence didn't wait to be told. Victor Harrington was removed as chief engineer within 48 hours, stripped of his title, reassigned to a logistics desk, the kind of office with no window and no future. 3 generations of Harrington legacy reduced to a man filing shipping reports in a room nobody visited. But the worst part wasn't the demotion, not for Victor. It was the press conference. Thursday after the race. A small room at Harrington headquarters in Surrey. Cameras lining the walls. Journalists packed tight. Carter Mills sitting in the front row. Victor walked to the podium. He looked smaller than he had in the garage. His suit hung wrong. His hands shook when he unfolded the paper. "I was wrong." His voice cracked on the second word. "I judged a man by his uniform, by his job title, by the color of his skin. And I was wrong. Carter Mills is a better engineer than I will ever be. And I owe him an apology that words can't cover." He looked at Carter. "I'm sorry." Carter stood, walked to the podium. The room tensed, cameras locked, journalists leaning forward, everyone expecting anger, expecting vindication, expecting a speech that would bury Victor Harrington for good. Carter extended his hand. Victor took it. His grip was weak. His eyes were wet. Carter held the handshake for 3 seconds. Then he nodded. One quiet nod. The same kind Graham Pratt had given him in the garage. The kind that says more than any speech ever could. No anger, no triumph, no revenge. Just a man who'd been told his whole life that he didn't belong, standing exactly where he was meant to be. In the weeks that followed, offers poured in from everywhere. Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull. Every team on the grid wanted the man who'd heard what 100 mechanics couldn't. The numbers doubled, tripled. Carter turned them all down. He stayed at Harrington Racing, the team that had never seen him. The garage where he'd been told to crawl. The place where Elijah Mills had never been allowed to set foot. Because Carter didn't want revenge. He wanted proof that the door could open, that it could stay open, and that the next person who walked through it wouldn't have to carry a mop. 6 months later, Carter Mills stood in Garage 7. Same walls, same concrete floor, same fluorescent lights. But nothing was the same. He wore an engineer's uniform now, his name stitched above the chest pocket, not sanitation, but lead engine specialist. The Titan V12 hummed behind him, tuned to specifications that only he fully understood. And beside him, leaning over an engine block for the first time, were 4 young men and women, the inaugural class of the Elijah Mills Foundation. On the workbench, open to the V12 diagram, sat a cracked leather notebook. Some engines need a mechanic. Some just need someone who listens. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's been told they don't belong. Drop a comment. What's a talent the world almost missed in you? And subscribe, because next week's story will make you believe again. Dog. Credentials don't always equal competence. Some of the smartest people never got a degree. They got experience. Stop looking at the title. Start listening. Real talent speaks for itself. Dog. Credentials don't always equal competence. Some of the smartest people never got a degree. They got experience. Stop looking at the title. Start listening. Real talent speaks for itself.